In the very early days, it was really just like, I love this chili sauce that I've grown up with, and I just want more people to taste it. And then eventually it was like, we're actually, invigorating the ethnic aisle of the grocery store. It was like kind of a controversial aisle, right? Because every single culture was pushed into one, and like it didn't seem like there was any excitement. That Asian aisle or the global aisle has become the hotspot of a grocery store because of brands like ours and also many others that have come in since we launched. Together, it's kind of like rising tides. We're lifting all boats.
Hey everyone, welcome to How Success Happens. I'm Dan Bova, writer and editor at entrepreneur.com. And today we've got a very spicy episode for you. Jing Gao is the founder and CEO of By Jing, a line of sauces and noodles inspired by her hometown in China that absolutely blew up on Amazon. And I've got a steaming bowl of it right here. And
Oh,
I could tell you that it smells delicious. It's making my eyes water just a little bit, not going to lie. But I can't wait to try it. Welcome, Jing.
thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Which flavor noodles do you have there? Is it the
I,
sweet and
I,
spicy or the
I,
chili crisp?
I went with the chili crisp.
Nice.
Is this going to, what should I expect? What heat level should I expect here?
I would say it's like a medium heat level. It's not, blow your, taste buds out of the water type of spice, but it's also, it's got a little heat, but I think the more important thing that it gives you is the depth of flavor, the
It
complexity,
is, yeah. I mean, I'm getting a little bit of the heat,
hmm
after, but wow, yeah, it's really delicious.
Thank you.
It's like you said, it's got that very, very rich flavor. But I'll spare everyone watching me eat on camera. We'll get back to that when the interview is over. But I want to know all about this and how it came about. But when you are calculating something like how hot should this be, how do you do that? How do you gauge what is good for your taste buds versus mine versus somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, taste is such a subjective thing, but I think the way that I've approached product development throughout my whole journey, and I used to be a chef before this, I had a restaurant in Shanghai, is really just like to tailor it to my own tastes. I think that's been the best guiding force of like, something that feels really personal and real and authentic to myself typically tends to translate well to others. And the other thing is like I'm from Sichuan. Sichuan is a region in China known for its super spicy cuisine, but even that is like sometimes characterized like it's actually known. It's actually much more balanced and complex than people give it credit for, right? And so I
Right.
wanted to have that shine through the flavors of our food rather than just pure heat or anything else. I wanted to show like just yeah, how all round delicious citron flavors can be.
So you didn't start off in the food business, am I right? You were actually in tech. So can you talk to us a little bit about that decision to get into the food business, and also was that a nerve wracking career decision to say I'm going to go this way?
I was born in Sichuan, but we moved around to many countries across Europe, and eventually we stayed in Canada. And I went, down this kind of typical immigrant child path of like going to college, and like, parents were like, okay, now you need to find a good job. And I went to business school, and so when you're in business school, the only options you really think you have for your future are investment banking. Management consulting, and in my case, the third option was brand management at a large CPG like P&G. So that's kind of what I started with. Eventually, I think this around this time, BlackBerry was big in the tech world. This was before iPhones became dethroned it, and it's a Canadian company. So being in Canada had those kind of had that front seat, and so I had this amazing opportunity to take a job with them in Asia, and through that and other roles in tech after BlackBerry, I ended up in China, where um, for the very first time in my kind of adult life, I started to reconnect with my heritage. So even though I was born there, I felt very disconnected from it. And food became this unexpected way for me to find that connection, to kind of thread the needle, and, reconnect with my family and my sense of identity and expression as well. So, um, it started out really, innocuous. I was just like exploring the food scene in China and learning about this 5,000-year culinary heritage that was so really misunderstood, I think, globally. And it was just fun. I was
Mm,
exploring a lot, I was eating everything. And eventually I started realizing, there was so much that was misrepresented about Chinese food abroad. What I was experiencing, the incredible quality of, ingredients, the depth of this history and all the different regional cuisines. It was so wonderful and so rich, and yet nobody knew about it. And there was all kinds of, misconceptions around Chinese food and the way that it evolved in the West. It became this like, desire or a mission for me to try to dispel some of that and kind of help to rewrite a narrative about Chinese cuisine on the global stage. So I started writing about it initially. I was, writing for food magazines and, I had a blog and eventually started taking celebrity chefs around China when they would come and film their TV shows and, developed kind of more of a niche in that area. And, one thing led to another, and I decided, maybe let me try to um, do my own thing in this world. And so I quit my job and eventually opened a restaurant in Shanghai.
that's amazing because, I think there's 9 out of 10 people who ask, "Do you love food?" Yes, I love food. I love eating. I love the whole experience of it. Some of us think, "Oh, I'm really good at this thing. I could even sell this. It's so good." But you did sell it, which,
Yeah.
like, what do you think? I know you explained the emotional connection to it, but what do you think gave you that confidence to say, like, I'm gonna actually do this?
Mm. I think it was definitely a gradual process. It didn't start out on day one where I just was like, I have this vision for a, global sauce brand that I'm going to move to the US and launch. It was definitely a step-by-step process, and each step sort of revealed the path ahead, and the possibilities ahead. And, in the very beginning, I actually started Fly by Jing as an underground supper club. So I had trained under this incredible chef in Sichuan who is one of the top chefs in China. The food that I was serving to my guests at my supper clubs, people's eyes would widen and they would just, you could tell that their palate was awakened and, they had never tasted these before, but you could tell that their lives will never be the same, after
Right.
they've
Yeah.
experienced this expansion of their palate. And I think it was through that. It was just literally through hundreds of these events and hundreds of these, diners that I could see their instant reaction. And I realized these flavors that I grew up with, that I was enamored with, were actually universal. Like there's really even people who, from all walks of life, from every part of the world, who had never had these flavors, never even heard of Sichuan, they all loved it, and connected to these flavors. So I was like, I think there's something here.
I mean, I think the great thing about food is, as you said, you put it in front of someone. Someone could fake like, "Oh, yum, great," and then they push it aside. But you could like right now, I'm using every ounce of my energy to not shove this all into my mouth. So you could tell instantly, do people like this or they don't? And I'm
Yeah.
sure you did. Which leads me to, I want to ask you about this kind of legendary Kickstarter campaign when you launched. You got 3,000, more than 3,000 people to come aboard. How did you go about fostering that community? Was it those supper clubs, or was it other things where you were able to reach out to so many people?
Yeah, I think the Kickstarter was really the impetus that kind of got everything started. I delayed doing it for a really long time because that was, really putting it out there, right? Like, I had gone to Expo West, this trade show in California, had seen that there was really a lack of, a gap in the market for high
I'm listening,
quality.
but I can't. I got to take another
Oh,
espresso.
go. Yeah, go for it. I could see there was a gap, right, in the market, and I knew that what I had could address it. But there was still a ton of fear around, you know, being so vulnerable, to put like kind of your blood, sweat, and tears out on the internet for everyone to see and to judge and to decide whether they want to give you their $25, to help make this happen or not. And it took me, quite some time to kind of get over that and work up that courage. So I studied the Kickstarter campaigns. There was, for every really successful one, there's probably like hundreds, if not thousands of ones that didn't do well, right? And so learned a lot of tips and tricks and like, how to kind of get the word out there. Just creating a Kickstarter campaign isn't enough. And I actually reached out to a couple of journalists who I knew had written about similar topics in the past. And just cold emailed them and was really, kind of gave them the pitch. And both of them ended up writing about the Kickstarter, which, kind of helped to push it to make it go viral. And so within the first day, we were fully funded, and we ended up, exceeding our goal by several thousand%. And that was an amazing initial, customer base. I think, they always say you need your first 1,000 customers, right, to
Yeah.
to prove this out. And so for me, that was the Kickstarter campaign.
So that's so great, and it's something that I've heard in variations of that. But the storytelling behind the product is so important to getting buy-in from or people even to try it. And I've got some of the packaging that you have here, and you've got your story, your face on there. You are talking to your customers directly in the packaging. Talk to us about the design and why you think it's been successful.
Interestingly enough, we've gone through several different branding iterations since we launched. When we first launched with the Kickstarter, you'll see in the initial like video and Kickstarter, it looked very, very different. And it's been this really interesting learning process as we've grown, as we've shown up in different and new channels, how the first point of interaction between a customer and your product is very different when they're seeing it on shelf at like a Walmart versus when they, in the early days when we were just a D2C only brand. So I would say that, we've always been though about kind of bold branding that probably didn't expect to see from a Chinese food brand. Up until then, Chinese food brands all lived within Chinatowns or, a Ranch 99 or, just you wouldn't see them in the mainstream kind of shelves in grocery stores. My main goal in the very early days was really just to like make people do a double take and, kind of stop them in their tracks and maybe even have them question themselves on why they expected a Chinese chili sauce to look different. And, eventually, and we had like a time when our packaging was super maximalist. I was really inspired by, we have a very, very rich backstory as well, right? There's a lot of, stories around even my own motivation to be doing this and my own search for identity and, a sense of belonging and all of that story, that backstory, we put on the jar. And then eventually, as we evolved our channel mix and and started showing up in places like Target and Walmart and Costco, for each channel, we kind of really had to think about, what are people seeing when they're walking down the aisle. And with this small real estate on surface of the jar and or
Yeah.
the noodles, how do you get across your value proposition in a very clear way, right? And differentiate from your competition, but also, even within your own product mix, like what's the difference between this one and the extra spicy and the extra crunchy and the sweet and spicy? So we've iterated a lot on the packaging, and each time we're learning more, and it's been a really interesting journey. But I think the through line of it all is like, I think the packaging gets across is um, kind of what we stand for, our bold nature, not shying away, not watering down who we are to, appease someone else, and also just like the kind of small batch and high quality nature of our products as well really comes across.
So when you talk about iterating, like what does that look like? Because it's a little different than just changing the color of something on a website. You're talking about like thousands and thousands of packages.
We haven't, we've done it I would say three times maybe or actually probably only two times in yeah two times, but there's been three versions since the beginning, so since almost 6 years ago. And um and uh the so some of the things I mentioned earlier, which is like, now if when someone was seeing us on their phones or on their computer screen for the first time, we were able to tell a much more, you know complex story. Whereas if they're seeing us on shelf and maybe they only have 3 seconds to make a choice and to understand what this is and who we are and what this is, and like why they should buy it and what they're going to do with it, it's a lot more complex. And I think it's doubly complex in our case because we are introducing people to something brand new. um, I think the idea of a textured hot sauce did not exist in the mainstream consciousness before we launched Fly by Jing, right? A textured hot sauce means that you have to actually use a spoon, and you can't just squeeze it out of a bottle, right? So there's like several layers of innovation on top of what is already mainstream that makes it difficult.
You're saying we a lot. So I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about that transition from a one person operation to as you're growing and, from raising money on Kickstarter to having investors. Can you talk about, was that a slow transition, or was there something that happened that, like, okay, we got to grow and we got to grow fast?
Yeah, so I was the only person working on it for the first, like, 1 to 2 years. Um and those days it was definitely slow because I was like doing everything, and also, there was no budget to do advertising, and so everything had to be super organic. Now we launched in early 2019, and by 2020 COVID had hit. And that was an interesting moment in time because, it could have gone many ways. It could have been like, wow, well, we can't import things from China anymore because of, the trade relations have broken down. Or in our case, what ended up happening was there seemed to be more interest in what we were doing. There was a lot of controversy, right? Like people were, on our social medias, saying all kinds of horrible things, like we don't want things from China, etc. But at the same time, I had the managing editor of New York Times reach out to me because he was a customer and he really enjoyed our products. And he was like, how are you doing? Like, is this a crazy time? Because China was shut down for a bit, we didn't have production going. And I had a conversation with him, not knowing that he was doing this article. And a couple weeks later, this article came out in the Sunday Times, which just kind of blew up our business overnight, it felt. And that year we ended up 10xing our business, and we were finally able to
Wow.
hire people, even pay myself. And that's when the company started to kind of like, have stronger foundations. And then the following year, we were able to bring on some investors who were able to really help us professionalize and kind of, you know, um, put better structures in place with the company to help us grow into our current trajectory. So it felt like, that COVID period was an overnight thing, but obviously there was a lot that went into it
Yeah,
before, but
yeah.
that was when everything kind of started to shift.
So when you were starting out on this journey, what did you think the word success would mean, and what do you think success means now?
I think, I never really paused to think about it in the very beginning because it was just everything was happening all at once, and you were just trying to stay above water. There was a ton of and I think um, the more that we've done this, the more kind of the vision solidifies as well. In the very early days, it was really just like, I love this chili sauce that I've grown up with, and I just want more people to taste it. And then eventually it was like, huh, like, interesting. We actually are creating a category. We're actually, invigorating the ethnic aisle of the grocery store that has been so stale for so long. And, almost like, it's kind of it was like kind of a controversial aisle, right? Because every single culture was pushed into one, and like it didn't seem like there was any excitement or any investment there. And now, what we've seen is that Asian aisle or the global aisle has become the hotspot of a grocery store because of brands like ours and also many others that have come in since we launched. And together, it's kind of like rising tides. We're lifting all boats. And that's been really exciting to be part of that vision. That's something that I didn't foresee when I first started this, right? And now, when I go to Expo West in the early days, there was not a single brand that you could really point to that was doing, modern premium Asian. And today, the aisles seem saturated with
Wow, wow.
such brands, right? And it's like, even these flavor profiles are even spilling over onto brands that are not ethnic brands, right? There's like Asian flavors in every single aisle of the grocery store. So um, I think being a part of that charge to have made that impact, I think is really meaningful and is what drives us. And we want to be a lasting brand. We want to be a brand that is not looked at as a niche, Asian brand, but rather like an American brand, an everyday brand that lives in people's kitchens all over the country. So that's our goal, is really to establish that foothold.
So what's your kind of best advice for someone listening to this that is currently a one person army hoping to get this product into people's cupboards? What would you say is like, here's my best advice to you?
I think that one thing to double click on is what I said in the beginning about how many layers of newness or innovation that your product has over something that's already established, right? Because when there's too many layers of newness, that just means the added complexity and amount of resources required to educate people and to market this to people. And I think, that's, I'm glad that it didn't stop me in doing this, because we were able to really create uh, kind of something brand new, but it did take a lot of like what felt like pushing uphill, right? And I would urge people, and I see a lot, I have a lot of founders that I mentor and advise, and I see a lot of founders doing, things that are really meaningful to them, and, but sometimes when the category or the product is, the slice of it is too niche, it is just that much harder, right? So I would encourage people to always think like, what is something that, like, how can I take what already is out there and then add like maybe one level of innovation so that it's just easier for people to understand, accept, and not so difficult for you to make a splash without having to raise a ton of money.
That's great. Great advice. So we have a newsletter, a How Success Happens newsletter, and we ask subscribers if they could co-found a company with any person living or dead, who would they pick? So I'd love to hear your answer to that.
If I could co-found a company with any person in history.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I would probably say Nikola Tesla, because he was onto something
Yeah.
with his, free energy and all kinds of things that he was working on that was very controversial at the time. And I think that if we could partner today with the help of AI, like it could really change the world.
Okay. Great answer. Great answer. I love that. And for anyone listening, you can get our free newsletter at info.entrepreneur.com/HSH. All right, Jing, let's get into the big speed round. So, what is a habit that you are happy to have and one that you wish you could ditch?
What is a habit I'm happy to have? Um, I I like, taking walks. So that is something I think that's important for me, clearing my head and getting my steps in. Something I'm happy to ditch. I really love like soup noodles and I eat a lot of them. And so, but most of the soup noodles out there are not that good for you. So we are developing something maybe that's better for you, that's really high quality. So stay tuned.
Ooh,
But that would probably be, but I
nice.
wouldn't need to kick the habit if I have something good, good for
Okay.
me.
Well, I think you just answered it, but I was curious. What is your favorite way to turn off your brain?
I love meditation.
Mm.
Yeah, so I do that probably every day, every morning, sometimes every night. It's yeah, I think it's the best way to connect with your higher subconscious, just your creativity. So clearing the brain, I think, has been the best way to usher in new and creative ideas for me.
That's great. And then finally, say I put a little too much of this on what I was eating. My mouth is on fire. What is the best way to extinguish a fire in your mouth? What's your preferred method?
I would say ice cream. I would
Mm.
say, have some vanilla ice cream. And it actually goes really well with chili crisp. So if you want to just try drizzling some on your vanilla ice cream, you can have it both, both ways.
So what's the best way for people to follow what you're up to? Like know what you're thinking about with your
Yeah.
business and anything.
So flybyjing.com, at flybyjing on socials, and then myself personally, I'm at Jing Theory. So Jing Theory, and I also share a lot of like entrepreneurship tips and books and resources that I'm reading and learning from that help me as I build. So I've been sharing that on my personal socials.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to let you go because you're a busy person and I want to eat these noodles before they go too cold. So thanks so
Yes,
much for your
enjoy.
time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.